Hey guys. Tonight we slip quietly into a world gilded in candlelight and excess. The kind of place where roasted swans arrive on golden platters and minstrels tune their lutes for the delight of kings and queens. You're not just wandering through dusty ruins or reading stiff textbooks. You're seated at the grandest banquet of the Middle Ages. Right there at the high table where everyone is watching and judging your table manners. Imagine the smell. Honey-glazed meats mingling with the spice of saffron and cloves. Aromas so thick they cling to your cloak. And here's the funny part. You'd probably be overwhelmed in 5 minutes. Between the noise, the richness of the food, and the sheer number of people crammed into the hall, you'd long for a simple sandwich and some peace. Honestly, you wouldn't survive this feast. Your stomach would wave a white flag halfway through. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your location and local time in the comments, because nothing feels more medieval than imagining this same story being whispered across different time zones like scattered torchlights on a dark map. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The great doors of the banquet hall groan open as you step inside. The stone floor is slick with rushes sprinkled with dried lavender and rosemary. Meant to hide the less pleasant smells of humanity, remember. Deodorant was not yet invented. The torchlight flickers off polished shields lining the walls, each painted with heraldic beasts. Lions with wide eyes and dragons that look suspiciously like large lizards. As you take a seat, the scale of the feast is staggering. Roasted boars' heads with apples clenched between their teeth. Pies taller than your hand. And trenchers of bread so thick they double as plates. Servants, mostly young boys, dart between the tables, balancing jugs of wine like they're on a medieval episode of Top Chef. The clamor is relentless, cups clink, musicians strum, and dogs bark at scraps tossed beneath the tables. You can't help but notice the hierarchy even in seating. The king and queen sit elevated at the dais, their chairs carved with patterns of vines and angels, while you, somewhere down the table, have to crane your neck just to see what they're eating. Spoiler alert. It's usually the good stuff. If you were hoping for a bite of swan, forget it. By the time it reaches your place, you're left with stewed turnips and maybe a chunk of stale bread. And yet, there's something intoxicating about being here. The colors alone are mesmerizing, nobles draped in crimson, deep blue, and green, their robes stitched with golden thread. The flicker of candles dances across jeweled necklaces, making them sparkle like tiny fireworks. Some guests wear tall hennons, those famous cone-shaped hats that look like they were designed by someone who'd had too much mead. You're half tempted to laugh. But careful, mocking someone's hat could get you challenged to a duel. You lean in to hear the music. Lutes strumming soft melodies, a recorder weaving delicate notes, and the steady beat of a tabor drum. Oddly enough, some of the tunes feel familiar. Little snippets that modern ears might mistake for folk songs at a Renaissance fair. But back then, this was elite entertainment. Carefully composed to flatter the ears of nobles who pretended they understood every note. And in case you're wondering, yes, sometimes the musicians slipped in bawdy lyrics. hidden beneath layers of polite performance. Suddenly, a servant places a dish in front of you, peacock, roasted whole and redressed in its own feathers. The sight is more spectacular than the taste. The meat is dry, a little chewy, and you silently curse the fact that this wasn't replaced with chicken. Still, you eat it because in this hall, food is theater, and you're part of the audience. Did you know that medieval chefs sometimes painted dishes with gold leaf just to impress? You take a bite and wonder what it does to your teeth. Medieval dentists, if you could call them that, were more likely to pull your tooth with pliers than polish it. At the head of the table, the king raises his goblet, signaling for silence. A hush falls. Even the dogs seem to sense it. He offers a toast, words thick with pride, and you pretend to understand the Latin phrases sprinkled throughout. Everyone cheers, banging cups against the table so loudly that the rushes stir beneath your feet. You realize this is not just dinner, it's politics in edible form. Who sits where? Who gets which dish? Who dares to speak? All of it is part of the great game. And in that moment, between the candle smoke, the taste of overcooked meat, and the glimmer of jewels, you feel caught in a paradox. It is both dazzling and overwhelming, luxurious and exhausting. You can't help but chuckle at the thought. These people lived in what they believed was the height of refinement. But you, with your 21st century sensibilities, would probably trade half this pageantry for a quiet night with pizza delivery and Netflix. But still, you lean back, sip from your goblet, and let the experience wash over you. Because whether or not you'd survive long here, tonight you're part of a story carved into history. A tale of extravagance and power where even the crumbs beneath the table carried meaning. And so, the feast continues. The banquet lingers in your senses, the music echoing faintly. The taste of too salty meat still coating your tongue, as you slip deeper into the castle itself. The feast was just the beginning. Now you find yourself wandering through the stone arteries of the fortress. The places where the truly luxurious life of the Middle Ages revealed itself. The air cools, and every step you take sends a hollow thud echoing through vaulted ceilings. You pause, tilting your head back. Above you stretch arches ribbed with carved stone, painted once in brilliant colors, though now faded into dusky shades. Imagine walking into a cathedral and then realizing someone decided to live there permanently. That's the castle for you, half palace, half fortress, fully intimidating. Your fingers brush against the wall, rough and cold, but then you notice something surprising: tapestries. Enormous woven pictures hanging like walls within walls, thick with patterns of knights, saints, and vines curling around imagined beasts. They don't just serve as decoration, they're medieval insulation, keeping drafts at bay. You think about modern insulation foam and laugh. Here, comfort means covering a damp stone wall with 20 pounds of embroidered wool. Practical? Sort of. Fashionable? Absolutely. As you move through the hall, servants hurry past carrying candlesticks taller than you, lighting the way for the nobility. The wax drips in long ribbons, hardening into stalactites that cling to bronze stands. The shadows cast are almost alive, elongated figures bending along the walls. Like the castle itself is filled with restless spirits. And speaking of spirits, you're probably wondering, was it spooky to live here at night? Yes, guests often swore they heard whispers or the rattling of armor when no one was around. Some historians still debate whether those were ghosts or just rats enjoying their version of the luxury life. Turning a corner, you stumble into a gallery. Where glass windows, yes. Actual glass, a rarity in the Middle Ages, filter moonlight across the floor. Stained glass isn't just for churches. Wealthy lords installed it in their castles too. Tiny diamonds of color pieced together to form geometric mosaics. You stand there, hypnotized by the glow, thinking how in your world glass is cheap and everywhere. Back then, owning a single window could announce your status louder than a Ferrari parked in the driveway. The smell changes as you approach the kitchens. Odd, isn't it? The castle itself is a maze of grandeur. But here you get the raw chaos. Smoke from wood fires. Pots boiling with broth, and bakers shoving loaves into great ovens. Strangely enough, kitchens were sometimes placed in separate towers, far from the main halls. Why? Because fire was a constant threat. Nothing ruins a medieval luxury lifestyle faster than an accidental barbecue of your entire residence. Beyond the kitchens, you're guided toward the private chambers of the lord and lady. This is where luxury flexes hardest. Imagine a bed so large it could fit a modern living room, hung with curtains of velvet to block out drafts. The mattresses? Stuffed with feathers. The sheets? Linen from Flanders. And those pillows. So many pillows that you might suffocate trying to sleep. You run your hand along the carved posts, noticing tiny details. Angels. Vines. Even caricatures of servants. Someone spent weeks chiseling those for the simple purpose of decoration. You spot a chest at the foot of the bed, its iron lock gleaming faintly. Inside, possibly clothing, embroidered robes worth more than a year of a peasant's work, or jewelry tucked into hidden compartments. Medieval thieves were clever, but so were the locksmiths, tiny mechanisms of springs and pins long before lockpicking became a YouTube niche. But castles weren't just about showing off wealth, they were defensive machines too. From the windows, you glimpse the courtyard below, lined with stables, workshops, and even a small chapel. Soldiers pace with halberds, their armor polished, though not nearly as gleaming as in movies. Real armor dulled quickly and was heavy, 40 to 60 pounds. About the weight of carrying a golden retriever on your back while trying to look intimidating. You smile at the thought. Walking deeper, you find the great hall again. Empty now but still echoing with memory. High rafters loom overhead, banners hang stiffly, and you can almost hear the feast replaying in your head. This was the nerve center, where politics and pleasure blended. Some say the architecture itself was designed to impress, to remind visitors of their own insignificance. Historians still argue whether these designs were purely symbolic or if they really intimidated people. Either way, you feel it. You pause by a narrow stairwell spiraling up into a tower. Climbing carefully, you reach a chamber lined with books, real manuscripts, hand-copied by monks, bound in leather, inked with gold leaf. This little library feels like stepping into another dimension. The scent of parchment, beeswax, and dust mixes in the air. You imagine nobles pretending to read these Latin tomes, showing off their education while secretly not understanding half the words. Kind of like when people today decorate shelves with books they've never opened. Finally, you step out onto the battlements. The night air cold against your face. Below, the village sleeps, its huts clustered like shadows. While here above you the torches of guards burn steadily. This contrast is the essence of medieval luxury. Inside these walls, tapestries, swan roasts, and stained glass. Outside, mud, smoke, and hunger. It's a strange divide, one you can't unsee. You rest your elbows on the stone ledge, the chill seeping into your skin, and let the silence wrap around you. The castle is both magnificent and suffocating, a monument to human ambition and human fragility. And as the torches flicker, you wonder what tomorrow in this gilded fortress might bring. The night deepens, and the castle hums softly in its sleep. The castle walls fade behind you, and now you find yourself stepping into a grand outdoor celebration. The kind of picnic that could only be staged by nobles who had way too much wealth and time on their hands. This isn't a simple blanket on the grass with sandwiches. No, this is an extravaganza of silk tents, golden goblets, and entire orchestras dragged out under the open sky. The air itself smells different here. Roasted meats mingle with the perfume of roses scattered across the lawns. And the breeze carries the distant trill of flutes and laughter. If you've ever packed a lunch for the park and thought you were fancy with sparkling water, this would make you feel like a peasant immediately. At the center of it all stand pavilions, huge canopies made of brightly dyed cloth. Striped in crimson, green, and gold, their peaks ripple in the wind like ships' sails. Nobles lounge inside on cushions imported from distant markets, sipping spiced wine while servants kneel at the edges, waiting for a snap of the fingers. A boy nearby is fanning his lord with a peacock feather fan. You can't help but think, poor kid probably has stronger arms than most gym-goers today. The food arrives in procession, almost like a parade. Platters of fish, still glistening from nearby rivers, are placed beside roasted geese stuffed with apples and herbs. Jellied fruits wobble in carved bowls. There's bread so fresh the steam still escapes when it's torn apart. And, most impressive of all, delicate marzipan sculptures shaped like castles and ships. Edible art meant to impress more than nourish. You glance down at one and think it looks too good to eat. Then realize it probably tastes like overly sweet clay anyway. Laughter ripples as musicians set up under one of the tents. A troupe of lutanists strums soft melodies while a singer begins a ballad about courtly love, full of longing, sighs, and impossibly idealized women. Around you, noble couples lean closer, pretending to swoon over the performance. Meanwhile, behind the tents, servants roll their eyes because they've heard this same song 17 times this week. You stifle a laugh. It feels like a medieval version of a pop hit on repeat. Then comes the entertainment. Jugglers toss knives into the sky, their blades flashing in the sunlight. Dancers in flowing gowns spin across the grass, their skirts fanning out like blooming flowers. And yes, sometimes there were trained bears or monkeys brought in to amuse the guests, luxury pets borrowed from menageries. Imagine sipping your wine while a bear does tricks in front of you. Safety regulations? Nowhere to be found. As you take it all in, you notice the seating arrangement again. Even outside, hierarchy rules. The king and queen sit beneath the grandest canopy, raised slightly above everyone else. The closer you are to them, the higher your rank. Down at the edges, far from the royal glow, lower nobles and merchants cluster, trying to look important but clearly marked as outsiders. And you, seated somewhere in the middle, realize that luxury isn't just food and spectacle. It's the invisible lines of power drawn across every picnic blanket. You lean back on your cushion, trying to relax, but the sun beats down. That's when a maid appears, offering a chilled drink, wine mixed with snow transported from the mountains and stored in icehouses. Yes, medieval nobles literally imported snow to cool their drinks. You sip and nearly choke at the thought. Someone risked frostbite just so you wouldn't sweat too much. Historians still argue about how practical those icehouses were, but the sheer audacity of it is enough to impress you. Children run past, little princes and princesses dressed in miniature versions of their parents' finery. They're followed by nurses clutching them tightly, terrified they might trip in front of the king. Their laughter cuts through the hum of music, a reminder that for all its formality, even medieval luxury had space for play. Nearby, a storyteller begins weaving a tale. His voice rises and falls with practiced rhythm, and the nobles gather closer, hanging on every word about knights, dragons, and distant lands. You notice the story sounds suspiciously like propaganda. Heroes who resemble the king, villains who resemble his enemies. You grin. Even in the Middle Ages, public relations was alive and well. The day drifts on, shadows stretching across the lawns. The musicians grow louder, the drinking heavier, and laughter spills like the wine onto the grass. You feel caught between awe and exhaustion. The grandeur is dazzling, but part of you longs for shade, quiet, and maybe a nap. If you showed up to this picnic with a simple basket of cheese and bread, you'd be laughed out of the field. But if you had to live like this constantly, you'd beg for a normal picnic just once. As the sun dips lower, torches are lit, and the party shows no sign of stopping. The glow of firelight makes the silks shimmer, and the night air fills with song. You stretch, letting the cushion sink beneath you, and let yourself sink into the rhythm of it all. Luxury, in this world, is relentless. It never lets you forget who has power, who has wealth, and who must sit quietly, pretending to enjoy a marzipan castle that tastes like sweetened brick. The evening settles, warm and heavy, as the outdoor feast carries on into the stars. The firelit picnic dissolves into twilight, and soon you are led back inside, deeper into the hushed heart of the castle. This time, the doors do not swing into a raucous hall or echoing corridor. They open into intimacy, into a chamber that feels like the very definition of medieval indulgence. The Lord's bedroom, and not just any bedroom. This is the kind of place where you suddenly realize your own mattress at home, no matter how high-tech, would feel embarrassingly plain. The first thing you notice is the bed. It dominates the room like a ship on calm waters, vast enough for 3 or 4 people, though intended only for one noble and perhaps a partner. 4 massive posts rise from the corners, each carved with twisting vines, lions, or cherubs that stare back at you with wide, unsettling eyes. Velvet curtains, dyed a deep crimson, hang from the canopy and can be drawn to block out both drafts and prying eyes. The mattress, stuffed with feathers, sags gently when you press your hand into it. Imagine lying down. It would be like sinking into a cloud. Except a cloud that weighs as much as a small cow. The air smells faintly of lavender. Pouches of dried herbs are tucked into corners and under pillows, meant to ward off insects and bad spirits. You can't help but chuckle. This was their version of pest control and aromatherapy combined. Historians still debate whether these sachets were genuinely effective or just part of the medieval obsession with scents as health cures. Either way, it beats waking up with fleas. Along the walls stand heavy chests bound in iron. They are both wardrobes and safes, containing gowns embroidered with golden thread, furs imported from the north, and jewelry tucked into secret compartments. You run your fingers over one of the locks, marveling at the ingenuity of medieval locksmiths. One wrong turn, and you'd never open it without the key. Thieves may have been clever, but nobles had entire systems designed to guard their finery. A fireplace flickers, throwing golden light across tapestries that cover the stone walls. One shows a hunt, hounds chasing a stag, another depicts biblical scenes. A reminder that luxury and faith often mingled in every detail. The flames crackle, and you imagine the comfort it must bring on cold nights when the wind howls across the battlements. Outside, peasants huddled under thin blankets. Here, feather-stuffed bedding and glowing embers promised warmth and security. The difference between classes feels like the thickness of those velvet curtains, absolute. You hear a soft clatter and turn to see a servant laying out basins of warm water. Nobles did not bathe daily. But when they did, it was in style, rose petals floating, oils added, and towels thick as cloaks. You smile at the thought. In a world where most people had to share a wooden tub, here you could splash around in scented water until the chill left your bones. And if you were especially rich, the basin itself might be lined with copper or even silver. Who needs rubber ducks when you've got gilded ewers? On a side table rests a delicate box of cosmetics, powders to whiten the skin, rouge for the lips, and kohl for the eyes. Fashionable ladies would rise early to paint themselves pale, a mark of wealth since it suggested they didn't toil under the sun. You can't help but laugh at the irony. Back then, pale meant rich, while today people pay good money for tanning beds. History has a wicked sense of humor. Above you, the ceiling beams are painted with tiny stars. Lying in bed, you would see a galaxy carved and colored just for your eyes. A medieval planetarium without any science behind it. The room hums with a kind of power. A silent reminder that this is not just a place to sleep, it is a stage. Visitors escorted here would instantly understand the rank of its owner. Every feather, every carving, every shimmering curtain was part of the theater of status. You slip closer to the window. Leaded glass panes, rare and expensive, reflect the moonlight. The view stretches out over the dark village below, where huts glow faintly from hearth fires. Out there, straw roofs leak, and children curl up beside animals for warmth. In here, the air is perfumed, the mattress a throne, the silence heavy with safety. Luxury in the Middle Ages wasn't about comfort alone, it was about contrast. You cannot ignore how every velvet drape screams, "I live differently than you." And yet, even in this chamber of plenty, there's a trace of unease. The locks on the chests, the curtains pulled tight, The servant stationed outside. Wealth invited envy. And envy could be dangerous. Some chronicles mention nobles who never slept soundly, always fearful of poisoning, theft, or betrayal. A bedroom could be both sanctuary and trap. You lower yourself into the feather-stuffed bed, feeling the weight of history press around you. The warmth of the fire lulls. The lavender drifts higher, and you imagine what it would be to close your eyes here. Swaddled in silk, yet never fully at peace. For all its grandeur, this luxury was fragile, delicate as the embroidery on the curtains. The flames crackle, shadows lengthen, and the night deepens. The luxurious chamber exhales, and you drift further into the story. The velvet curtains whisper shut behind you, and soon your gaze is drawn to the sparkle. The kind of shimmer that can make you forget you're supposed to be tired. The queen's jewels. They sit in carved wooden caskets, each lined with silk so smooth it feels like water beneath your fingertips. The moment the lids lift, the air seems to brighten. Gems do that, catch light, bend it, throw it back at you in colors that make the stars outside feel dim. Laid out carefully are crowns, circlets, necklaces, and rings. Some made of gold so soft you wonder how they didn't bend like butter. Others encrusted with sapphires, emeralds, and rubies the size of cherries. Pearls hang in strands, perfectly round, shimmering like frozen drops of moonlight. You pick one up, hold it in your hand, and it's heavier than you expected. Luxury isn't just about shine, it's about weight. The reminder that beauty in the Middle Ages often came with literal gravity. The crown itself gleams most of all. Gold, etched with vines, studded with cabochon gems. It's smaller than you imagined, closer to a circlet than the giant Burger King crowns pop culture might suggest. Slip it on your head and it would press down with surprising force. Like balancing a glittering stone garden on your scalp. Some queens complained of headaches from wearing them too long. No surprise there. You laugh softly. Pain for fashion is older than high heels. A servant demonstrates how these treasures are worn, and you realize it's an entire performance. Necklaces aren't just jewelry, they're messages. A ruby meant power and passion. Emeralds whispered fertility and renewal. Sapphires spoke of divine wisdom. You think about how modern fashion brands push meanings into their products. Medieval rulers were doing that centuries ago, only with much higher stakes. Beside the jewels lies something unexpected, a reliquary locket, shaped like a tiny golden shrine. Inside rests a scrap of cloth said to be from a saint's robe. Whether or not it's real, the symbolism is potent. To wear jewels was to shine outwardly. But to carry relics was to claim heaven's endorsement. Some historians still argue about how authentic many of these relics really were, but back then, faith and glitter made an unbeatable combination. You notice how carefully everything is catalogued. Tiny parchment tags note which pieces came from dowries, gifts, or spoils of war. One necklace was a wedding gift from a French duke. Another wrested from a defeated rival. Each jewel is not just wealth, it's a story. A map of alliances, betrayals, and negotiations. When the queen stepped into a hall adorned like this, she wasn't just dazzling, she was broadcasting a resume written in gold and gems. The light flickers, and you catch sight of a mirror, a rarity. Polished metal framed with ivory. The queen's jewels glimmer in its surface, doubling their power. Imagine her here, standing still while attendants fastened each clasp, adjusted every chain, tugged gently at her veil so the pearls framed her face just so. The process could take hours. Compared to your 5-minute morning routine, it feels absurd. Yet if you were expected to represent half a kingdom in a single glance, maybe you'd spend hours on jewels too. A ring catches your attention. It is simple compared to the rest. A band of gold with a single inscribed stone. When you tilt it, you see faint scratches, words etched in Latin. Half prayer, half love note. Was it from a king? A secret admirer? Or perhaps a relic of an older time? No one knows. The historians write theories, but no certainty remains. And there's something oddly comforting about that even in all this glittering certainty of wealth, mystery still lingers. But here's the catch. Wearing jewels this heavy wasn't always fun. Necklaces pulled at skin, crowns pinched, rings bruised fingers, and carrying them was risky. Queens often traveled with guards assigned just to protect their jewelry chests. Imagine needing bodyguards for your accessories. You chuckle, though to be fair, you probably wouldn't want to wander with a ruby the size of a plum dangling from your neck either. The chamber grows quieter, and you feel the shimmer settle into your bones. The jewels are more than ornaments, they are armor, currency, propaganda, and sometimes cages. The queen could be weighed down by them as much as she was elevated. Luxury, in this case, is a double-edged sword. You step back, leaving the caskets half closed, the gems still glowing faintly like embers in the dark. The room feels both intimate and overwhelming. As the door closes behind you, the shimmer fades, replaced by the steady beat of your own footsteps. And once again, you drift further along the winding halls of history, into the next chamber of this gilded life. The jewels fade behind you, their glitter lingering in your imagination. And suddenly you hear it, the distant bark of hounds, sharp and eager, cutting through the morning mist. You follow the sound until the castle gates open. And there it is, the hunting party. The ultimate aristocratic pastime of the Middle Ages. This isn't a quiet stroll in the woods with binoculars. No, this is pageantry on horseback. Wealth flexed through leather saddles, silk banners, and an army of dogs that probably eat better than most peasants. You step outside into crisp air, the kind that bites at your cheeks, and see nobles mounted on tall, muscular horses. The animals gleam, their coats brushed until they shine. Each rider wears tailored hunting gear, velvet jackets, boots of supple leather, gloves lined with fur. Some even wear feathered hats, which look stylish but seem entirely impractical for galloping through branches. You can't help but grin. Medieval luxury often valued appearance over comfort. Even while chasing a deer, the hounds strain at their leashes, their noses quivering. Dozens of them, greyhounds, mastiffs, spaniels, trained for years to obey subtle gestures. Their handlers shout, whistles pierce the air, and suddenly you feel the energy rise. It's less a casual outing and more the kickoff to a medieval sporting event. Imagine the Super Bowl, except with more mud, more barking, and a lot more fur. Trumpets blare, riders lower their lances. The king, perched on a horse draped in a cloth of arms, signals the start. The gates swing wide, and the hunt surges forward. You grip your reins, though honestly, you have no idea how to ride, and lurch awkwardly into motion. The ground thunders beneath hooves. Wind whips past your ears. It's exhilarating and terrifying, like riding a roller coaster where the brakes haven't been invented yet. The quarry today is deer. A stag with antlers sprawling like branches of a tree. It darts through the underbrush, quick as lightning, the dogs streaming after it in a howling river of muscle. You follow, branches snapping against your shoulders, mud splattering up your boots. Luxury here is not quiet elegance, it's adrenaline, dominance over nature, and proving that your wealth gives you control of both animals and men. There's a strange irony to it. Nobles rode out in style. But the actual work, driving the animals toward the hunters, keeping the hounds in line, fell to servants. You notice peasants running alongside, clapping and shouting to flush the deer out. It's their labor that makes the spectacle possible, though their reward is usually nothing more than scraps of the feast later. Some historians still debate whether peasants ever got to taste venison from these hunts or if every bite went straight to the high table. The chase intensifies. You see a hawk released, its wings slicing the air as it dives toward smaller prey. Falconry was another luxurious sport, requiring birds imported from far-off lands and trained with painstaking patience. You watch in awe as the hawk swoops, a flash of feathers against the pale sky. It's a moment so dramatic it feels staged, like a living tapestry unfolding in front of you. Finally, the stag slows, surrounded by dogs and riders. A noble leans forward, spear ready, and delivers the final blow. Cheers erupt. The trumpets blare again, and the hounds leap onto the carcass before handlers pull them back. It's both brutal and ceremonial, a display of skill and dominance wrapped in ritual. You feel a twinge of discomfort, yet here, in this world, it is the very definition of honor. The carcass is quickly dressed, parts of it reserved for royalty. Other cuts promised to loyal followers. The heart, sometimes, is presented to the king or queen as a token of courage. You can't help but smirk. Nothing says romance like offering someone a still warm deer heart. Medieval courtship was not subtle. As the hunt winds down, the nobles dismount and recline on blankets spread across the grass. Servants pour wine, hand out sweetmeats, and light small fires for warmth. The riders laugh, boasting about their part in the chase, each one exaggerating just enough to sound heroic. It's the medieval equivalent of posting victory selfies after a marathon. You sit back, catching your breath, realizing that this too was luxury, not just the silks and jewels, but the chance to spend hours chasing animals purely for pleasure. For nobles, the hunt was power in motion, proof that they controlled land, beasts, and the very pace of life. For you, it's another reminder. In this world, even leisure was designed to remind everyone of who ruled and who merely ran alongside. The dogs quiet, the horns fade, and the forest sighs as if relieved. The day's hunt is over, and the spoils are carried back toward the waiting castle. The sun has barely crested the horizon when you find yourself once more inside the castle walls. This time invited to witness something you'd never expect to be so decadent: breakfast. You probably imagine a medieval morning meal as a hunk of bread and maybe some thin beer to wash it down. And yes, for peasants, that was often the case. But here, For nobles living in gilded chambers, breakfast is another performance, a declaration of wealth before the day has even begun. The first surprise is the drink. A servant places a goblet before you, and you blink. Honey wine. For breakfast. Sweet, golden, thick as syrup. It coats your tongue with warmth and sugar. You laugh softly. Your modern dentist would faint at the thought. Beside it sits a jug of ale. Because water was considered unsafe. Imagine starting your day with mead instead of coffee. Productive? Probably not. Entertaining? Definitely. Plates arrive, one after another, and you realize that this is no quick bite before work. It is a banquet in miniature. Fresh bread, its crust still steaming, is served with soft cheese. Creamy and rich, imported from distant abbeys. Then come the pastries, delicate, flaky, glazed with honey and dusted with sugar. Sugar, by the way, was a luxury imported across continents. To sweeten your morning bun with it was like pouring liquid gold onto your plate. You spread it carefully, feeling ridiculous for worrying about calories in a world where people worried about famine. Next arrives the meat, bacon, ham, even cold cuts from last night's feast. You chew slowly, noticing how heavily salted everything is. Salt was more than seasoning, it was preservation. Wealth crystallized into flavor. A slab of salted pork was as valuable as coin. Some historians still debate whether nobles truly indulged in daily heavy breakfasts or if such feasts were reserved for show. Either way, here you are, staring at more protein than you'd normally eat in a week. Fruit follows, apples, pears, and grapes, served fresh or stewed in spiced wine. The grapes especially draw your attention, because you know that for many peasants, fruit was a rarity, yet here, nobles popped them like candies, discarding the stems without a second thought. And just when you think the table can't hold more, a servant sets down a platter of eggs, poached and sprinkled with herbs. Eggs in the Middle Ages were simple food, but for the wealthy, they were seasoned with exotic saffron, turning the whites golden. Breakfast eggs turned into jewelry for your mouth. Around you, nobles chatter lightly. This isn't the loud, raucous atmosphere of a feast. It's quieter, almost refined. A young lady dips bread into her honeyed milk. Another samples figs wrapped in pastry. They gossip, laugh softly, and dab their lips with linen napkins embroidered with family crests. Even the act of wiping your mouth is branded here. You chuckle to yourself. Luxury marketing existed long before logos on sneakers. You reach for a pastry, and it crumbles in your hand. Sticky honey drips onto the tablecloth, and you panic briefly. Across the table, a nobleman notices and smirks. He's clearly seen worse. Still, you imagine the servants sighing later as they scrub at the stain. For them, luxury meant endless chores. For you, it's just a sticky reminder that decadence always leaves traces. The strangest dish arrives near the end: spiced porridge. Yes, porridge, but don't picture the gray slop of fairy tales. This version is enriched with almonds, raisins, cinnamon, and yes, more sugar. It's like dessert masquerading as health food. You spoon it up and think, okay, I could get used to this. Then you remember that one bowl of it probably cost more than a week's wages for a craftsman. Suddenly, it tastes heavier. A servant pours you another drink, warm milk mixed with honey. Smooth and soothing, You sip, and for a moment, you feel something close to peace. This breakfast, ridiculous in its abundance, is a gentle beginning to a day that will surely end in more pageantry. It's strange, though. The nobles eat slowly, deliberately, as though savoring the fact that they can. Meanwhile, outside, peasants are already in the fields. Stomachs empty, hands raw, the contrast lingers like an aftertaste. You sit back, wiping your fingers on the embroidered napkin, and smile. Breakfast here isn't about hunger. It's about proving that even the first bite of the day can be gilded, spiced, and sung over by servants. You feel both spoiled and guilty, amused and unsettled. Medieval luxury has that effect. It dazzles while reminding you how sharp the divide between classes truly was. The plates are cleared, the last drops of honey wine vanish, and the nobles rise slowly, ready to dress for the day. You take one final sip, sweet and golden, and let the morning hum settle into your bones. The taste of honeyed milk still lingers as you're ushered into another chamber. This one bursting with fabrics so rich they practically glow. Today's luxury is clothing, not the rough tunics of peasants, but garments so ornate they could double as currency. You stand in awe before wardrobes stuffed with colors that scream power: crimson, sapphire, emerald, and deep purple. That last one, purple, was notoriously rare, dyed from crushed sea snails imported from far-off shores. Imagine explaining to someone today that your shirt cost hundreds of mollusks. You'd sound insane, but back then it meant prestige. A lady-in-waiting draws out a gown. Holding it high, it's embroidered with gold thread. Tiny stitches glinting like sunlight trapped in cloth. Each thread is real metal, beaten thin and twisted into wire before being sewn in painstaking patterns of vines, stars, and heraldic beasts. The gown itself weighs more than you'd expect, more armor than clothing. You try to imagine walking gracefully in it, but honestly, you'd probably trip 3 steps in. Luxury sometimes demanded balance and stamina that rivaled any workout. For men, the display is no less ostentatious. Tunics lined with fur, cloaks trailing to the floor, hose dyed in brilliant colors that make modern tights look timid. Belts studded with silver clasps complete the look, pulling fabric into sharp pleats. You glance in a polished metal mirror and almost laugh. Even if you looked ridiculous. The point wasn't style, it was status. Clothing spoke louder than words in a time when literacy was rare. If your robe glittered with gems, no one needed to ask your rank. One servant unfurls a mantle so wide it sweeps across half the room. The fabric is trimmed with ermine, white fur flecked with black tips. Ermine was so prized that only royalty or high nobility could legally wear it. Sumptuary laws, they called them, rules that dictated who could wear what. Step outside in the wrong fur, and you risked fines, ridicule, or worse, you smile at the absurdity. Imagine police patrolling fashion choices like medieval fashion police. And yet, these laws held weight, drawing sharp lines between classes. You watch as the queen's gown is prepared, layers upon layers, a chemise of fine linen, a kirtle of silk, and finally, the overdress embroidered with gold, each layer fastened with jeweled pins. It takes 3 attendants just to lace and drape everything correctly. It's like watching a live-action origami performance. Except the fabric costs more than your entire yearly budget. You can't help but think of modern red carpet events, designers boasting about hours of hand sewing. Medieval nobles lived that every day. The scent of cedar lingers. Trunks are lined with it to ward off moths. Imagine the horror of finding a moth hole in your golden embroidery. That wasn't just damage to a garment, it was an attack on your reputation. Nobles employed entire staffs just to maintain wardrobes. Brushing furs, folding linens, repairing seams. Servants were the medieval equivalent of dry cleaners. Stylists and tailors rolled into one. A young noble strides past, his tunic blazing with yellow and green stripes. The pattern loud enough to wake the dead. You nearly laugh aloud. Yes, medieval clothing could be elegant, but it could also be garish, flashy colors and clashing designs meant to catch the eye. Some chroniclers even complained that fashion had become too wild, with sleeves so long they dragged on the ground and shoes with tips curled like snails. Fashion critics, it turns out, are eternal. There's one gown that takes your breath away. It's woven with not just gold, but also tiny pearls stitched into the fabric. Each step would make it shimmer as though the wearer carried a piece of the night sky. It's exquisite, impractical, and absolutely deliberate. Nobles weren't trying to be comfortable, they were trying to be unforgettable. And yet, you feel the weight of it all. Literally, imagine sweating under layers of wool, fur, and gold embroidery, with no air conditioning, and still having to smile gracefully. You whisper a small joke to yourself. Fashion Week must have felt like endurance training. Historians still argue whether clothing was truly this extravagant every day or mainly reserved for ceremonies. But whether daily habit or staged event, the message was the same. Wealth is something you wear. As you step back from the cascade of fabric, you realize the nobles weren't dressing just for themselves. They were dressing to remind everyone else exactly where they stood in the great medieval pyramid. The attendants smoothed the last gown, the golden thread catching firelight, and the chamber quiets. You exhale, half dazzled, half suffocated by all that fabric. Luxury, here, is heavy, shimmering, and inescapable. The doors close softly, and your footsteps echo toward the sound of faint music drifting from the next hall. The rustle of embroidered gowns fades behind you, and soon another sound takes its place, soft, lilting, coaxing you forward. Music, not the chaotic din of feasts or the trumpet calls of the hunt, but something smoother, layered, and carefully crafted. You follow it down a passage and into the great hall once more, now transformed into a stage for the court musicians. Here, luxury doesn't glimmer, it sings. You pause just inside the archway. A small ensemble is gathered at the dais, a harp, tall and golden, its strings quivering under slender fingers, a lute, its pear-shaped body cradled like a lover, a recorder sending a sweet, piercing note through the air, and a tabor drum, steady as a heartbeat. Their melodies weave together, filling the hall with warmth that almost hides the cold stone walls. Almost. The audience sits in arranged rows. Nobles leaning back in carved chairs. Goblets in hand, heads nod to the rhythm, though you get the sense that few of them are actually listening closely. For them, the music is background, proof that wealth can turn silence into art. For you, though, The sound is intimate, each note carrying centuries of practice, skill, and the quiet lives of musicians who would never own the halls they played in. The harpist plucks a string, and the sound lingers like a droplet of water falling into still air. It reminds you of ambient playlists designed to calm nerves. Except this one comes with the added tension of an audience that could make or break a career. Court musicians lived in luxury by proximity, they played in gilded rooms, ate scraps from noble tables, sometimes even received clothing as payment, but they were still servants. Bound to please. You imagine one wrong note at the wrong time could mean disgrace. Or worse. The singer begins, her voice soaring above the instruments, carrying a ballad of courtly love. The story is predictable, a knight, brave but lovesick, yearning for a lady he can never have. Everyone sighs politely, though you suspect more than one person in the hall has lived that story already. In messy, unromantic ways, you smile faintly. It's the medieval equivalent of pop radio. Repetitive, overdone, but still strangely comforting. Behind the performers, servants adjust candles to highlight the gilded edges of instruments. You catch sight of a psaltery, a flat, stringed instrument plucked delicately, and a rebec, an ancestor of the violin, scraping out a mournful tune. Together, they create a texture of sound you can feel in your bones. It's mesmerizing, though you have to admit, some of the notes are a little sharp. Medieval tuning wasn't exactly Spotify ready. One noble leans over to another, whispering, and they both chuckle. You wonder what they're saying. Maybe mocking the singer's dramatic gestures. Maybe reminiscing about a scandal hinted at in the lyrics. Music here isn't just entertainment, it's a mirror, reflecting the audience's own desires and anxieties. You think of modern concerts where people film the stage but really spend most of their time gossiping with friends. Same energy, different century. And yet, every so often, the music cuts through everything. A chord swells, the singer's voice trembles with emotion, and the hall goes still. In that moment, you sense what luxury truly meant here, not just wealth, but the ability to turn fleeting beauty into ritual, to surround yourself with sound crafted only for your ears. While outside the walls, silence reigned over mud huts. There's even comedy in the mix. A jester steps forward between songs, strumming a lute clumsily and twisting words into puns that make half the hall laugh and the other half groan. His job isn't just to entertain, it's to diffuse tension, to say dangerous truths in silly disguises. You chuckle when he jokes about the king's feathered hat looking like it was stolen from a particularly stylish goose. Risky, but effective. As the music winds down, a hush falls over the room. The last notes hang in the air like smoke, then vanish. Nobles clap politely, some tossing coins toward the musicians, others already distracted by their own conversations. For the performers, this is the pinnacle and the prison, living amid grandeur, but never truly belonging to it. You step back into the corridor, the echoes of harp strings still tingling in your ears. The hall grows quiet again, but the memory of music lingers like perfume. Luxury, you realize, doesn't always glitter. Sometimes it whispers, a melody woven into stone halls, reminding you that even silence could be bought and reshaped by wealth. The night deepens, and the sound fades, leaving only the faint hum of your own footsteps leading onward. The music fades into silence. And soon you find yourself pulled outside again. Not to the woods or gardens this time, but into the bustle of something equally dazzling, a medieval market fair. But don't picture the muddy stalls of peasants selling onions. No, this is a luxury fair. A gathering where nobles stroll among merchants who have traveled weeks, even months, to display wares from the corners of the known world. It's less like your Saturday farmer's market and more like a medieval luxury expo. Complete with silk tents, exotic smells, and prices that would bankrupt anyone without a title. The first thing that strikes you is the riot of color. Stalls are draped in fabrics from Venice, dyed so vividly they hurt your eyes. Reds so deep they look wet. Blues shimmering like pools of water. Greens richer than a spring meadow. A merchant unfurls a bolt of silk, and the crowd gasps. It seems to ripple like liquid in the sunlight. You reach out, run your hand across it, and it's so smooth it almost slips from your grip. Silk like this didn't just appear here, it traveled from China. Through endless hands, caravans, and ships. By the time it arrives, its price is higher than a knight's yearly income. Next come the scents: saffron, cinnamon, cloves, and pepper spilling from sacks onto the tables. You sneeze involuntarily, and the merchant smiles knowingly. Spices were the crown jewels of the kitchen, worth their weight in gold. They transformed even the simplest dishes into statements of wealth. To serve meat dusted with pepper was to say, "Look at me, I can afford to eat fire." You imagine nobles sprinkling cinnamon the way people today flash designer handbags. Historians still argue about whether spices were used excessively in medieval cooking or sparingly as status symbols. But either way, standing here, you see how intoxicating they must have been. A glassblower from Murano demonstrates his craft. He shapes molten glass into goblets, each shimmering with streaks of cobalt and amber. The crowd applauds as though he has conjured magic. And in a sense, he has. Glass was rare, fragile, and expensive, a luxury few households could boast. The goblets here sparkle like trapped sunlight, so delicate you're afraid even your gaze might crack them. Further down the row, ivory carvings gleam pale against dark cloth. Miniature shrines, combs, rosary beads, each one etched with intricate detail. You pick up a small box, its surface carved with vines and tiny faces. And it feels both beautiful and unsettling. Where did the ivory come from? Elephants from far-off lands. Hunted and traded, their lives turned into trinkets for noble vanity. You set it down quickly, the weight of it heavy in more ways than one. You turn a corner and nearly stumble into cages. Inside, exotic animals pace, monkeys, parrots, even a small leopard on display. They are not for sale to peasants, of course. They are destined for royal menageries, where nobles will parade them as proof of their dominion over not just land and people, but nature itself. Imagine buying a parrot just to show you could. Luxury, you realize, often meant bending the natural world into symbols of wealth. The fair buzzes with performance as well. Jugglers toss silver balls, acrobats tumble, and musicians weave through the crowd. Children gape at painted masks from Italy, their bright expressions both comical and frightening. A merchant hawks perfumes made from roses and musk, letting nobles dab tiny drops on their gloves. One sniff, and the scent lingers for hours. In a world where bathing was rare, perfume was less about attraction and more about survival. You overhear deals being made, loud bargaining in French, Italian, Arabic. The air hums with languages, each voice haggling, boasting, exaggerating the rarity of their wares. A noblewoman points at a necklace, and within seconds, the merchant is bowing, offering a price so high it nearly makes you choke. Coins clatter, hands shake, and the necklace disappears into a velvet pouch. The noble smiles smugly, already calculating the gossip she'll ignite when she wears it at the next feast. And yet, for all its glamour, the fair also feels precarious. Guards patrol, eyes sharp for thieves. Merchants shout louder, each desperate to make enough profit to justify the perilous journey here. Luxury is intoxicating, but it's also fragile. Silk can tear, glass can shatter, animals can bite. The fair hums with both wealth and risk, balanced on the edge of spectacle. As the sun dips, torches are lit, their glow reflecting on silks and glass until the whole fair shimmers like a mirage. Nobles linger, sipping spiced wine, laughing too loudly, showing off their purchases. You step back, overwhelmed by the sheer abundance. Dazzled yet exhausted, luxury in this marketplace is relentless, demanding attention at every turn. And as the torches crackle and the stalls close one by one, you feel the weight of it settle in your chest. Wealth here is not just about owning, it's about displaying, performing, making sure every gem, every spice, every shimmering scrap of silk is seen. The fair fades into darkness, leaving only the faint perfume of saffron and smoke on your clothes as you drift onward. The soft hush of silk curtains fades behind you, replaced by the sharp ring of metal and the thud of boots in unison. You emerge into a wide courtyard where torches flare, and the sight hits you with a different kind of opulence, a parade of guards. Soldiers arrayed not for war but for display. Luxury, here, is the weight of steel worn like jewelry. An army dressed as much for admiration as for defense. The guards stand in ranks, their armor gleaming so brightly you wonder how many hours of polishing went into it. Breastplates catch the firelight, helmets shimmer like molten silver, and shields painted with crests glow in reds, blues, and golds. Each man is a mirror reflecting wealth, discipline, and intimidation. You smirk softly. Peasants outside might own one rusty knife between them, while here a single guard's gear costs more than an entire village. A captain strides forward, his plume of dyed feathers swaying with each step. He barks an order, and the formation shifts instantly, rows of men moving as though one body. The sound of boots pounding the earth in perfect rhythm. You watch, impressed, and realize this isn't just training. It's choreography. Every step drilled to awe onlookers as much as to prepare for real battle. Trumpets blare, and the soldiers march, spears held high, banners fluttering overhead. The banners themselves are lavish, embroidered with gold thread, fringed with tassels, each carrying the crest of a noble house. They ripple against the night sky, like painted flames in motion. Luxury here is not subtle. It announces itself loudly, daring anyone watching to doubt the strength of this household. You glance at the armor more closely. Some suits are practical, plain but strong. Others are so ornate they look like sculptures, breastplates etched with vines, helmets shaped like snarling beasts, gauntlets chased with silver patterns. These weren't meant for war. They were parade armor, designed to make nobles look like walking statues of power. You chuckle. It's less about protection, more about intimidation. Fashion Week. In one corner, a pair of guards demonstrate swordplay, blades ringing against each other with sparks. The crowd cheers, though you notice the moves are exaggerated, more performance than combat. Another pair of archers loose arrows in perfect rhythm, shafts thudding into painted targets with satisfying precision. The message is clear. Wealth can afford not just weapons, but endless hours of practice to make soldiers look flawless. The nobles watching the parade nod approvingly, whispering among themselves. They aren't just admiring the men, they're measuring power, weighing loyalty, reminding each other who commands the best trained, best dressed guards. This parade is political theater. Every polished played a line in the script of authority. And yet, beneath the glitter, you sense the tension. Guards must maintain perfection at all times. One stumble, one dent, one misstep in formation, and whispers spread quickly. Luxury is beautiful but unforgiving. It demands that even armor shine like a jewel. You wonder how heavy it must feel to carry both steel and expectation. As the parade draws to a close, the soldiers stand still, their spears angled like a forest of silver. A final trumpet sounds, the banners dip, and the formation bows in unison to the noble audience. Applause follows, measured, polite, but enough to echo off the stone walls. Then, just like that, the moment ends. The guards march off into the shadows. The banners lower, and the courtyard grows quiet once more. You're left staring at the fading gleam of polished steel, realizing luxury here is not just possession of arms. It's the ability to turn war into ceremony, soldiers into spectacle. As you drift onward, the sound of clashing metal fades, replaced by the clink of glass and the low murmur of voices in candlelit chambers. The next indulgence awaits, not armor or parades, but knowledge dressed in gold and leather, the libraries of the nobles. The last echoes of marching boots dissolve into silence, and now you're led through a quieter passage where the air is cooler, tinged with the scent of ink, wax, and leather. A door creaks open, and suddenly you find yourself in a space unlike the bustling courts and roaring halls. This is the library, a treasury not of gold, but of words. Here, luxury is knowledge, and in the Middle Ages, that meant something far rarer than jewels. The room glows with lamplight, each flame trembling against rows of wooden shelves. The shelves themselves are lined not with the familiar bindings of modern books but with thick, hand-copied manuscripts. Their covers are leather, some dyed red or blue, others left plain but clasped with brass fittings. A few are even studded with gems. Because why not make your Bible double as a crown? You chuckle quietly. Luxury is reading a book that could bankrupt a merchant. The hush here is heavy, sacred, broken only by the faint rustle of parchment. A clerk seated at a desk bends low, carefully copying a text line by line. His quill scratches softly, pausing every few moments to dip into ink. His lips move as he writes, whispering each word, because in this time, reading silently is unusual. You grin. Imagine a library today where everyone mutters out loud. Chaos. Nobles stroll through the shelves. Hands brushing bindings. Eyes lingering on illuminated initials that gleam with gold. These aren't libraries in the modern sense, open to all. They're private collections, curated carefully, meant to impress visitors as much as to enlighten. A noble might own a dozen volumes and be considered incredibly learned. To see hundreds together is astonishing, a sign of wealth so vast it spills into parchment. You lean closer to one open book and marvel at the colors. Ultramarine blue, vermilion red, gold leaf outlining every letter. The margins teem with playful doodles, a rabbit riding a snail. A knight battling a dragon the size of a dog. The text itself is serious, law codes, theology, chronicles, but the artists couldn't resist slipping in humor. You whisper. Even in luxury, mischief survives. Historians still debate how much nobles actually read these books versus using them as status symbols. Some clearly loved learning, hiring tutors, engaging with philosophy and poetry. Others simply displayed volumes the way you might show off a sports car, rare, shiny, and proof of sophistication without needing to know how to drive. You smirk. Owning books was impressive even if you never got past page 1. At one table, a noblewoman pores over a psalter, her finger tracing the Latin text. Women of high rank often became great patrons of books, commissioning prayer books, romances, even translations. A scribe nearby reads aloud from a French epic, his voice lilting as knights and maidens come alive in verse. The room fills with quiet awe, as if the walls themselves are listening. The library isn't just for words, though, it's a vault of maps and diagrams. 2. Rolled scrolls reveal sketches of distant lands. Half accurate, half fantastical. Dragons mark the edges of seas. Jerusalem gleams at the world's center. And trade routes snake across parchment like veins of ink. To own these maps is to claim a piece of the world before ever setting foot there. The furniture itself is luxury, carved desks, inlaid cabinets, even reading stands designed to hold massive tomes upright. Candles drip onto bronze holders shaped like lions or angels. Everything whispers refinement. Even the act of reading is cushioned in wealth. And yet, you can't help but notice the irony. Outside, most peasants will never learn to read at all. For them, knowledge is oral, passed in songs, gossip, memory. Here, a single book can outlast lifetimes. Bound in leather, written in ink, shielded from the world, knowledge as luxury is also knowledge as barrier, guarded, exclusive, dazzling in its rarity. As you step back, the lamplight flickers across your eyes. The library feels timeless, eternal, like a pool of silence in a world that never stops clamoring. Luxury here isn't loud, or edible, or glittering. It's the weight of words preserved against time, held only by those who could afford them. And as you close the door gently behind you, another scent drifts down the corridor, less of leather and ink, more of roasted meat and cinnamon. Luxury is about to shift again, this time into the kitchens where taste itself becomes an indulgence. The hush of the library fades, replaced by a hum of activity that grows louder as you descend into the belly of the castle. The air warms, thick with scents that make your mouth water. Roasting meats, cinnamon, cloves, saffron. You've stepped into the kitchens. And suddenly luxury isn't about jewels or parchments, it's about flavor. Here, wealth is measured not only in gold but in the taste of something most of the world will never even smell. The space is cavernous, vaulted ceilings blackened with years of smoke. Fires roar in great hearths. Spits turning slowly with haunches of venison and sides of boar. Pots bubble over the flames, filling the air with the rich aromas of stews heavy with herbs. The clatter of knives, the thump of cleavers, the scrape of ladles, it's a symphony of work. And every servant moves with the precision of a dancer. You grin faintly. If the ballroom upstairs is grace, this is choreography with knives. One cook sprinkles saffron threads into a pot, and instantly the broth blooms golden. Saffron, worth its weight in silver, was the crown jewel of medieval kitchens. To serve a dish glowing with it was as much a statement as wearing a ruby. Another servant grinds peppercorns with a mortar and pestle, the scent sharp and exotic. You remind yourself that pepper came from thousands of miles away, shipped across seas at enormous cost. For peasants, pepper was mythical. For nobles, it was sprinkled casually, like snow. On a nearby table lies a strange array of ingredients. Figs dried to sweetness, dates sticky with honey, almonds piled high, candied ginger sparkling with sugar. Sugar itself was a luxury, imported at high cost, so much so that it was sometimes locked in chests like treasure. Here, it's stirred into sauces, dusted onto pastries, molded into sculptures for feasts. You chuckle softly. Imagine your dessert doubling as table decoration, and costing as much as your neighbor's yearly income. Fishmongers bring in barrels of salted cod and eels, while another servant unwraps something extraordinary, a peacock. Its feathers carefully saved, the bird will be roasted, then redressed in its brilliant plumage and brought to table whole, looking alive but entirely edible. It's theater, edible theater, and nobles adored it. Historians still argue whether anyone actually enjoyed eating such dishes. But one thing is clear: presentation mattered more than taste. The head cook, sleeves rolled and face flushed, shouts orders above the din. He is part general, part artist, orchestrating dozens of workers. A boy turns the spit endlessly, sweat shining on his brow. A woman stirs a cauldron with a paddle taller than herself. Bakers pull loaves from ovens, their crusts crisp and golden, filling the room with the smell of comfort and home. In the corner, a confectioner shapes almond paste into little animals, rabbits, birds, even castles. Luxury, apparently, was eating your toy before it spoiled. You notice how much labor and fuel it takes. Fires devour wood at astonishing rates. Servants scurry endlessly. Ingredients vanish by the pound. A single feast could consume enough food to feed a village for weeks. Luxury here isn't just flavor, it's scale. The sheer audacity of abundance. Not every dish is exotic, of course. Bread, stews, roasted meats, all staples, but transformed with spices, sauces, and spectacle. Even ordinary dishes become extraordinary when dressed in saffron and sugar. Served on silver platters, announced with trumpets. You can't help but laugh. Dinner as performance art, take that. Modern cooking shows. The smells overwhelm you now, savory and sweet, spicy and smoky, all tangled together. You imagine how it must have felt for guests walking into the great hall above. Bellies already rumbling, dazzled not only by what they saw but by what drifted from these kitchens. As you leave, you glance back one more time at the chaos. Sparks rising from hearths. Cooks shouting, knives flashing, a peacock shimmering unnaturally blue in the firelight. You carry the scent with you as you climb upward. And there, above the kitchens, the next act of luxury awaits, the dining hall itself, where all this labor is transformed into spectacle, and the feast becomes theater for every sense. The clamor of the kitchens fades beneath your feet, but its aromas rise with you, roasting venison, spiced sauces, honey-glazed fruits, until they spill into a chamber vast enough to swallow the entire castle. You've entered the grand banquet hall, the very stage for all that culinary chaos below. Here, luxury stops being preparation and becomes performance. Feasting not just as sustenance but as theater. The hall itself is overwhelming. Long trestled tables stretch into the distance, their surfaces gleaming with polished wood or covered in embroidered cloth. Tapestries line the walls, depicting hunts, saints, and mythic beasts, while a vast hearth at the far end roars with flame, throwing golden light across the room. Overhead, chandeliers drip with candles, their wax falling like frozen rain. You whisper, "This isn't dinner, it's a coronation every night." Nobles enter in procession, seating themselves according to rank. The highest lords and ladies sit at the raised dais, closest to the fire, their chairs carved with lions and griffins. Lower ranks spread outward down the hall, each place carefully chosen to remind everyone of their station. Seating charts, you realize, were political maps, one misplacement, and a feud might last generations. Trumpets blare, and the first dishes arrive. Servants march in, balancing platters so extravagant they seem more sculpture than food. A roasted swan, its feathers redressed in gold leaf. A boar's head crowned with rosemary and oranges. Tusks painted silver. Whole pies from which live birds flutter out when cut, sending the hall into delighted chaos. You can't help but laugh softly. Medieval fine dining was basically edible special effects. Between courses, minstrels play, jesters tumble, and poets recite. The feast is never just eating, it's a full sensory assault. You sip spiced wine from a silver goblet, its rim set with sapphires, and listen as the hall fills with laughter, music, and the clatter of knives on platters. The noise is glorious, overwhelming, almost dizzying. The food itself dazzles with extravagance. Dishes sparkle with sugar sculptures, sauces tinted with saffron, meats dressed in colored jellies. Fish arrive in delicate aspects shaped like castles. Even the bread is sculpted into intricate braids. You glance around and realize this isn't about taste alone. It's about proving that wealth could bend nature itself into art. A servant pours wine endlessly, ruby liquid catching torchlight as it swirls into goblets. Another brings trenchers, thick slabs of bread used as plates, later given to servants or the poor outside. Even generosity is staged. Nobles could dine lavishly and still appear charitable by letting their leftovers trickle down. You grin. The medieval version of recycling, except with breadcrumbs instead of cardboard. At the high table, nobles converse loudly, each story bigger than the last. One brags about hunting a stag, the size of a horse. Another recalls jousting victories, conveniently more glorious in the retelling. Laughter booms, goblets clink, and you realize half the feast is food, the other half performance of personality. Somewhere down the table, a noblewoman releases her trained falcon to snatch a morsel of meat. And the hall erupts in amusement. A page spills wine and earns a cuff on the ear. Laughter echoing again, the feast swings between grandeur and slapstick, solemnity and silliness, never pausing long enough to grow dull. And through it all, the servants weave tirelessly, platters cleared, goblets refilled, torches trimmed. For the nobles, the feast is indulgence. For the workers, it's labor disguised as magic. The contrast makes you pause. Luxury, after all, is rarely without a hidden cost. At last, the final course arrives, candied fruits, almond pastes shaped like animals, gingerbread pressed into gilded molds. Sugar glitters across the table like frost. Sticky and fragrant, nobles lean back in their chairs. Bellies full, voices loud with wine, laughter rolling like thunder against the stone walls. As the hall begins to quiet, the candles gutter low, smoke rising in lazy ribbons toward the rafters. The feast is over, but its memory lingers in every corner, etched into the smell of wine and the glimmer of crumbs on silver plates. You step away from the hall slowly, ears still ringing from music and laughter. Already, another sound beckons you, a quieter murmur, rhythmic and deliberate. Beyond the feasting lies the chessboard of noble leisure, where strategy replaces spectacle. The gaming halls. The echoes of laughter and clinking goblets trail off as you leave the banquet hall, replaced by a subtler sound, the clicking of game pieces, the shuffle of cards, the low murmur of wagers whispered in confidence. You've entered the gaming chamber, where nobles turned their wealth into play and sometimes into peril. Here, luxury takes the shape of dice, boards, and strategy dressed up as leisure. The room is smaller than the hall but no less impressive. Rich carpets cushion the floor, and tapestries of hunting scenes soften the walls. Candles glow over carved tables, their surfaces inlaid with ivory or mother of pearl. At each one, groups of nobles lean in close, their faces lit with concentration, pride, and the occasional smirk of victory. You smile. It turns out even in the Middle Ages, people loved beating their friends at board games. At the first table, you see a chessboard, but not any chessboard. This one gleams with gold and silver squares. The pieces are miniature sculptures, knights carved from ivory, bishops inlaid with gems, kings and queens with crowns tipped in pearls. The nobles move them slowly, deliberately, voices low as strategies unfold. Chess wasn't just a game, it was a metaphor for life, war, and power itself. To win was to prove intellect, patience, and superiority. And yes, to lose was humiliating, especially when the pieces themselves were worth more than your entire estate. Nearby, another group huddles over a backgammon board. Dice tumble across the wood, ivory cubes clicking like bones. Coins clink as wagers are laid, some discreetly, some with reckless bravado. Nobles loved to gamble, though it could ruin fortunes as easily as it built them. One man leans forward, triumphant, sweeping up a pile of silver coins with a grin so wide you almost pity his opponent. Almost. On another table, cards are dealt, not quite the modern suits you'd recognize, but hand-painted decks with elaborate designs, cups, swords, coins, batons. The cards are stiff, painted with gold leaf that catches the light, fragile enough that only nobles could afford to handle them carelessly. Every round is a blend of luck and swagger, each flick of the wrist saying, "I can afford to lose this hand." You chuckle softly. Luxury is betting your dinner money on painted paper you could have commissioned into a Bible instead. But not every game is cerebral or subtle. In one corner, a group plays dice more like brawlers than thinkers. The dice clatter loud, laughter bursts, and groans follow unlucky throws. Cheating is suspected constantly. Accusations thrown half in jest, half in rage. Servants hover nearby, ready to fetch more wine, as though keeping the losers drunk softened the stain. Then, in a quieter alcove, you notice something gentler. Noblewomen gathered around a game of riddles and verses. Each one takes a turn reciting a line of poetry. The next must answer with another. It's as much wit as wordplay. And the laughter here is softer, more private. Luxury in play wasn't always about money. Sometimes it was about showing cleverness, charm, or the ability to make others laugh. Of course, every game carried risk beyond the board. Friendships could sour, rivalries ignite. A noble who won too often might be accused of sorcery. One who lost too often might lose more than coin, dignity, or influence. Even leisure here was edged with politics. Historians still debate whether nobles truly played for fun or whether every move, every throw, was just another way of proving dominance. Watching the sharp glances across tables, you suspect the latter. Still, there's an undeniable vibrancy in the room. The clink of dice, the sweep of chess pieces, the shuffle of cards. It's a symphony of play. For a moment, you almost forget the stakes, lost in the rhythm of it, lulled by the hum of concentration and the occasional burst of laughter. At last, the game's slow. Coins are pocketed, boards folded, cards gathered. The nobles rise, stretching, some smug with victory, others sulking in defeat. Servants blow out a few candles, the room slipping into shadows. As you step back into the corridor, the mood shifts once again. From the intimate world of games, you hear a deeper, more powerful hum, the low vibration of wheels and hooves. Luxury is about to move outside the castle, where carriages and travel show wealth on the open road. The clatter of dice fades behind you, replaced by the rolling thunder of wheels on stone. You step out into the castle courtyard, where a new kind of spectacle gleams under the torchlight, the carriages of the nobility, waiting like jeweled beasts. Luxury has left the hall and library, now it conquers the road. The first carriage you see is massive. Its body carved from oak and painted in bright heraldic colors, scarlet, gold, and blue. Panels are decorated with scenes of hunts and saints, their details outlined in gilded leaf. Brass fittings gleam like fire in the torchlight, and its wheels, thick and iron-rimmed, look sturdy enough to crush anything in their path. Servants polish the wood obsessively, because even mud-spattered vehicles had to shine before departure. You smirk. Imagine treating your car like a jewel box. Except your car needs 6 horses to pull it. Inside, the carriage is a cocoon of fabric. Silk curtains line the windows. Embroidered cushions pile high on benches. And fur blankets wait for cold journeys. A noblewoman climbs in, her gown rustling, and instantly she disappears into velvet shadows as though stepping into a moving room. The smell of lavender sachets spills out, fighting the inevitable scent of horse. Next to it, you spot another carriage, sleeker, painted black with silver trim. This one belongs to a rival noble. Its understated design no less a statement: power through restraint, wealth that whispers instead of shouts. Historians still debate whether such modest carriages were truly modest or simply another way of flexing superiority. After all, when everyone else is covered in gold, sometimes the most shocking thing is to be plain, if plain means hand-carved ebony panels and silk interiors. Horses stamp impatiently, their harnesses jingling with bells and silver fittings. Some even wear decorative plumes dyed scarlet or white, bobbing as they toss their heads. The animals themselves are luxuries, massive, trained, fed with care most peasants never knew. You imagine the expense of keeping a dozen of them, all for the sake of pulling one noble down a muddy road. You notice the small details: footmen standing stiffly at the back, liveried in colors that match the carriage, their clothes as much a part of the display as the wood and wheels. When the carriage moves, they'll cling to narrow rails, their job less about service than about completing the picture of wealth. Luxury here isn't comfort alone, it's a traveling parade. The carriages roll out slowly, wheels creaking, hooves pounding. Crowds of peasants gather along the road, staring in awe or resentment as the procession passes. For them, travel is a pair of worn boots. Perhaps a donkey if fortune smiles. For nobles, travel is a stage, every mile another performance of superiority. You whisper. It's the medieval version of posting your vacation photos. Except you can't scroll past the dust your horses kick in your face. Of course, the ride itself wasn't exactly smooth. The suspension was rudimentary, every rut and stone jolting the passengers inside. Cushions and furs softened it. But still, a long journey could feel like being tossed in a chest full of pillows. Yet, despite the discomfort, nobles embraced it, because even bumps felt better behind silk curtains than on a bare saddle. And when not in use, the carriages themselves were displayed in stables or courtyards, as visible signs of rank. A well-crafted carriage said more than a dozen banners. It proved wealth could move. Wealth could travel. Wealth could arrive in style. As the last wheel rolls into the distance, the courtyard grows quieter again. You realize that luxury in travel wasn't about speed or comfort alone. It was about the impression left on every eye watching. You turn back toward the castle, where another kind of movement waits. Not on wheels, but on paper. Not across muddy roads, but across generations. The noble pastime of commissioning family portraits, luxury as legacy, is ready to unfold. The rattle of carriage wheels fades into the night, and as you step back inside, a quieter rhythm greets you, the scratch of brushes, the faint smell of oils and pigments. You've entered the painter's studio, where nobles transform not just their faces but their very legacies into luxury. Here, the canvas is as much a battlefield as any joust. And the weapon is paint. The chamber is warm with lamplight, illuminating easels scattered with unfinished works. Wooden panels lean against the walls, some bearing half-finished faces, others just the ghostly outline of figures waiting to be filled in. Jars of pigment clutter the tables, powders of red vermilion, deep lapis lazuli, and crushed malachite, each ground fine as dust and mixed with oils that glisten like jewels. You lean closer and catch the metallic glint of powdered gold, ready to highlight halos or gild a noble sleeve. In the center, a noble family poses stiffly. The Lord sits in a carved chair, his robes draped heavily across his knees. His wife stands beside him, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder, her gown spilling to the floor like liquid silk. Their children cluster around, each one placed carefully to emphasize inheritance, sons closer to the father, daughters arranged to flatter their mother. You grin. Medieval family photos. Except no one dared blink, fidget, or sneeze. The painter works slowly, layering colors, sketching fine lines of jaw and brow. Portraiture was luxury at its most personal. To capture a likeness was to declare permanence, to freeze power in pigment. These weren't just paintings, they were propaganda. Even when wrinkles showed, painters softened them. Even when noses hooked or chins receded, brushstrokes smoothed and corrected. A noble paid for legacy, not accuracy. You whisper. Instagram filters. Medieval edition. On one panel, you see a child painted with a falcon perched on his wrist, symbol of nobility. On another, a lady holds a book, suggesting education, though whether she could actually read is beside the point. Every prop is symbolic, every pose deliberate. Luxury wasn't only in being remembered, but in being remembered correctly. Historians still debate how many portraits were true likenesses. Some argue they're faithful records, others believe they're idealized, even fictionalized. Looking at the polished faces staring out, you suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. These were half biography, half fantasy, carefully curated myths in paint. The workshop hums with quiet effort. Apprentices grind pigments, stretch canvases, and polish wooden frames. Each frame is its own masterpiece, carved with vines, saints, or heraldic beasts, sometimes gilded until it blazed like the sun. The portrait wasn't just the image, it was the entire construction. A shrine to the subject's status. Finished works hang on the walls, and as you glance across them, you see generations staring back, lords and ladies in stiff poses, their eyes eerily alive, their garments shimmering with impossible wealth. To walk through this gallery is to feel the weight of history pressing down. Not in words or laws, but in gazes that refuse to fade. And you realize, this was luxury not for the moment, but for eternity. Jewels could be lost, feasts forgotten, even castles fall, but a portrait, carefully preserved, could outlast them all. It could whisper down centuries, I was here. I mattered. I ruled. As you step away, the painted eyes seem to follow you, their gaze heavy with both vanity and ambition. You leave the studio quietly, the air thick with turpentine and pride. Beyond, you hear another hum, not brushes this time, but strings and pipes. Music drifts down the corridor, richer than anything you've heard before. Luxury shifts again, from painted legacy to living sound. as musicians prepare to flood the air with harmonies designed for noble ears only. The smell of oils and pigments lingers faintly on your clothes as you follow the sound of music through another corridor. The air grows lighter, warmer, until you step into a grand hall where sound itself has become the noblest luxury. Here, musicians gather not for the village square but for the court, and every note they play is a thread of wealth woven into the air. The chamber glows with candlelight, chandeliers dripping with wax like frozen rivers. Cushions line the floors where nobles recline, goblets in hand, their eyes half closed as they let the music wash over them. On a raised platform stand the musicians, dressed in livery that mirrors their patron's crest. Their instruments gleam, lutes polished smooth as glass, harps strung with gut that shimmers faintly, recorders and shawms whose carved wood glows in the flickering light. A harpist begins first, fingers dancing across strings with liquid grace. The sound is delicate, almost otherworldly, filling the hall like falling water. A lute joins, plucking quick, playful notes, weaving in and out of the harp's melody. Then a singer raises her voice, clear and haunting, her song winding above the instruments like smoke. You feel the sound in your chest, soft but insistent, as though the hall itself has become an instrument. You glance at the nobles listening. Some close their eyes in rapture, others nod rhythmically, more concerned with being seen appreciating the music than actually hearing it. Historians still argue how deeply nobles valued art versus how much they valued its ability to impress guests. You grin. Half the point was showing you could afford to make silence expensive. The repertoire shifts. A consort of viols begins, their low hums vibrating through the room. The players lean close, bows gliding, harmonies swelling until they sound like a cathedral made of strings. At the same time, a pipe organ thunders softly from the corner, each note rolling like waves against the walls. The layering is astonishing, and you realize this isn't entertainment alone, it's architectural sound, meant to overwhelm and elevate. Between solemn pieces, the mood lightens. A group of minstrels perform lively dance tunes, their fiddles quick and sharp, their tambourines jingling with joy. Nobles laugh, tapping their feet, some even rising to dance in little steps. For a brief moment, the stiff hierarchy melts into shared rhythm. The music allows them to be human without losing face. Then comes a strange performance, a song in several voices, weaving together in rounds. The singers face one another, their lines overlapping like braids. It's complex, mathematical, precise, luxury as intellect in sound. You can't help but chuckle softly. The medieval version of showing off your high-tech surround sound system. The instruments themselves are luxuries. Many are imported, carved from rare woods, strung with strings made from imported materials. A single harp could cost as much as a small farm. And yet here it's played casually, almost nightly, its notes drifting into the rafters as if expense were weightless. Servants move quietly among the listeners, refilling goblets, offering sugared almonds. The music never stops, it's a river that carries the night forward. An endless proof of wealth that can summon beauty at will. For nobles, to command musicians was to command harmony itself. As the final piece fades, silence lingers in the hall like a held breath. Nobles applaud politely, some snapping fingers instead of clapping to maintain elegance. The musicians bow, sweat shining on their brows, their instruments cradled like fragile children. For them, luxury is service; for the nobles, luxury is the right to own beauty, if only for a night. You step out quietly, the music still echoing in your bones, as though strings were humming beneath your skin. The corridor outside feels suddenly empty. But another sound waits, not notes, not brushstrokes, but laughter and gossip. Luxury shifts once more, into words traded like coins, the realm of noble salons and witty conversation. The echoes of viols and harps trail after you like ghostly threads of sound. But now another rhythm grows louder, voices, laughter, the crackle of wit sparking in candlelight. You follow it into a smaller, more intimate chamber, and here luxury takes on yet another shape. Not jewels, not feasts, not painted legacies, this is the salon, where words themselves glitter like treasure. The room is warm and inviting, paneled in dark wood and softened with cushions and rugs. A fire crackles in the hearth, throwing golden light onto clusters of nobles lounging in circles. Goblets gleam, platters of candied fruits sit half forgotten. But all attention is on the flow of conversation. Here, luxury is leisure wrapped in intellect, gossip spun into art. At one end, a courtier begins a tale. His voice is smooth, practiced, carrying just enough scandal to keep every ear hooked. He describes a rival's disastrous attempt to impress at a tournament, embellishing until the image of a knight toppling backward like a tipped cow sends the room into laughter. You grin. Medieval comedy clubs were basically gossip sessions with better outfits. Another noblewoman interrupts with a sharp retort, her wit cutting clean as any blade. She mocks the courtier gently, weaving a pun into her jab that leaves the group laughing again. This is more than banter, it's competition. A contest of tongues as much as dice or chess. To shine here is to prove not only wealth but cleverness. And cleverness could be its own currency. Servants move discreetly through the chamber, refilling cups with spiced wine and setting out little plates of sugared almonds and dates. But no one lingers on the food. The true feast is the conversation. Stories tumble one after another. A rumor of a lady's clandestine romance. A tale of a king's eccentric new pet. An anecdote about a monk who accidentally fell asleep during his own sermon. Each story is embroidered with exaggeration. Because the goal isn't truth, it's effect. Historians still debate how accurate these gatherings were as intellectual salons. But standing here, it's clear they were equal parts philosophy and theater. Some nobles recite poetry, slipping in verses they claim as their own. Others debate theology or politics, their arguments laced with double meanings and sly jabs. And always, gossip threads through it all, binding the lofty to the ridiculous. The air is thick with perfumes and smoke from the fire. Laughter rises and falls in waves, punctuated by sighs and the occasional gasp of shock when a particularly scandalous detail is whispered. You chuckle softly. The medieval version of reality TV, except you had to attend in person. And the stakes were reputations instead of ratings. One group debates which noble house throws the most lavish feasts. Another speculates on marriages yet to come. Eyes flick across the room constantly, weighing reactions, measuring smiles, Every laugh is both amusement and signal. Every word both entertainment and move in the endless chessboard of courtly politics. You realize quickly, this isn't idle chatter. It's rehearsal for influence, practice for persuasion. The salon is where alliances are hinted at, rivalries sharpened, reputations inflated or demolished in a single witty phrase. Luxury here is time itself, the freedom to sit by a fire and let words dance while others outside labor in the cold. As the night deepens, the laughter softens into murmurs. Voices slower, more languid. Some nobles lean close, whispering secrets half hidden by goblets and fans. Others recline back, content to let the warmth and the wine lull them into half-sleep. The chamber hums like a hive, not frantic but steady, buzzing with human presence. At last, the fire burns lower, embers glowing red, conversations fade, goblets empty, and nobles drift away, still chuckling, still whispering as they vanish into corridors. The salon quiets, leaving only the faint scent of wine and smoke in the air. You step back into the hall, carrying the echo of laughter with you. And ahead, you sense the end approaching. Luxury has paraded in jewels, feasts, music, and gossip, but now it softens. One final chamber waits, where the tone will dim, and the night itself will begin to close its eyes. The laughter of the salon lingers faintly in your ears as you drift down a quieter corridor. The torches here dimmer, the air cooler, the castle has settled, the clamor of feasts, the strum of music, the hiss of gossip, each has ebbed away, leaving only silence heavy enough to hear your own breath. You've reached the final chamber, where luxury doesn't dazzle anymore. It softens, cradling the night as it folds gently shut. The room is wide but hushed, its walls draped with thick velvet curtains to keep out the cold and the noise. Candles burn low in sconces, their flames small and steady, like tired eyes fighting sleep. A great hearth still glows, but it's no longer roaring, it smolders quietly. Embers sighing with the last warmth of the day. Chairs are pulled closer to the fire, furs thrown over them carelessly, as if no one has the energy to arrange them anymore. A few nobles remain, voices lowered to murmurs. They sip the last of their wine slowly, savoring it more out of ritual than thirst. One recites a verse, soft and broken, barely above a whisper. Another hums the ghost of a tune from earlier, her voice so faint it dissolves into the crackling fire. The grandeur of the court has melted into something smaller, more human. Luxury now is not noise or spectacle, but the quiet permission to simply rest. You sink into a chair, running your hand over the soft fur draped there. It's warm, heavy, like an embrace. Your body relaxes into the hush, every muscle unclenching from the parade of sights and sounds that filled the day. Outside, the wind brushes against stone walls. A hollow, distant song. Inside, the silence is complete, tender, absolute. A servant moves softly through the chamber, snuffing candles one by one. The room darkens, each flame disappearing like a memory. The embers fade from orange to red to the faintest glow, until even the hearth looks sleepy. Shadows stretch long and gentle across the floor, curling like blankets over the stone. You breathe slower now. The images of the day blur together, the glint of jewels, the roar of tournaments, the shimmer of painted saints. The echo of music, the murmur of gossip, they swirl softly in your mind, no longer sharp or loud, but fading into haze, like colors bleeding into water. The castle exhales around you. Walls that once held echoes of trumpets and laughter now hum only with silence. The great halls, the chapels, the kitchens, all stilled. Even the menagerie sleeps, its beasts quiet, dreaming in their cages. Every corner of this world, so filled with performance, has given in to the same simple truth. Night conquers all. Even luxury. Your eyelids grow heavy. The story thins into whispers, each detail drifting further from clarity. You imagine silk sheets drawn up around you, the murmur of servants fading, the weight of velvet curtains shutting out the cold. Outside, the stars burn faint above the black sky. But here, within these walls, there is only warmth, only stillness. You let your breath deepen, let your body sink, let your mind quiet. The world of jewels and feasts and games dissolves into softness, into shadows, into the silence of sleep. And with the faintest whisper, the story leaves you too, dimming like the last ember, carrying you into dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.